Mhm. What is up, people, and welcome back to the Story StrengthCast. Myself, Shane Storey. Today, it's just going to be a solo episode with myself. We're going to be going through a bit of the bulk updates so far, how things have been getting on, any changes that have been made. We're also going to go through some mistakes that people often make in game phase 2 and some things I've been helping some of my clients with in regards to planning out their own, coaching them through the likes of the Christmas months too, because that is something that's popping up more and more within check-ins in regards to how to navigate these next couple of weeks in the lead up to Christmas. And it's always a time that people struggle with, right? I've actually kind of realized when I was going through my podcast list of all the episodes done, I haven't actually recorded anything around Christmas just yet. So we're going to talk a bit today about that, because I know it's for a lot of people a challenging time, and people don't know how strict they should be with their likes of their bodybuilding, powerlifting, physique-based goals. People don't know how relaxed they should be. Some people have a hard time enjoying themselves around this Christmas period, and I've actually been through a number of Christmases myself, and I've came out the other side, like, still able to get jacked and still able to improve my health and still able to get strong and help all of my clients do the exact same. So I will have some good insights for you today in regards to how we can do that. So before we get into the podcast, if you do me a big favor and give me a rating review on podcast platform you're listening on, it does help the podcast grow. It's more people to listen to the podcasts, and yeah, that's, I guess, what I want to do. I want to try to grow the podcast, right? Because look, I am sick to death of Instagram. I've mentioned it probably many times before. Short form content is just boring. I don't have it in me, and you've probably guessed it by the length of the podcast, and quite often the solo podcasts I do are just as long as the guest podcast. I can't keep things succinct, right? Like, trying to get people hooked in the first 3 seconds, it's not me. I'm long-winded, and it's just how it is. So yeah, I want more people to listen to podcasts, I want more people to watch YouTube. It's a better medium for me to express myself, my ideas, and ultimately at the end of the day, I know from my own content consuming, I guess, patterns, yeah, content consumption patterns. Um, Long form is just, it's like, it feels like you're in the middle of a conversation, right? Like, and I think people get a better sense for people's ideas, beliefs, values, all that kind of stuff when they do listen to long form content versus short form content. Anyway, I digress. One thing you might notice about the last two podcasts, and this one too, that I've recorded, is I didn't include an intro, and that's something I had kind of brought into a number of the podcasts across like the last couple of months. And you know what? It actually kind of started off as a technical difficulty I had when I was recording with Nico. So my process for recording intro is I use Riverside here. So Riverside essentially is like a online platform where you can record your podcast, and it kind of takes care of a lot of like the editing. But I would have to record a podcast, download it, record the voiceover manually through likes of Final Cut Pro, and then kind of stitch up the file itself. And when I was at home, I was recording the one with Nico, so I was at home in Ireland, and for whatever reason, Final Cut Pro just would not recognize the microphone. I would, like, even without the microphone, it wouldn't record the voiceover. So I just left it and just put it up. And I don't know if people care, like, do like you, the listener, right? You can comment on Spotify now. Let me know. Do you care about having an intro there? Like, sometimes, like, it's a good opportunity for me to explain who this guest is, because I recognize that not everybody knows people that I speak to, even though if I do, but maybe kind of talking about this person's like accomplishments, or like, again, their background in academia or whatever it may be, it kind of like sets you up for what's in store. But at the same time, then you have big podcasters like Chris Williamson, and he just goes straight into it, right? And I think I can definitely see the merit in that, and it's kind of what I'm leaning towards. Obviously, it makes it my job a lot easier from the editing point of view. I can just put up the file, but it takes away, I guess, your people can have like a bias, right? So if they hear, okay, this person's coming in from this background, they might be like, I'm just going to switch off right now, or I'm going to lean in and listen a little bit harder, right? Some people, maybe the academia can make them buy in, being a pro bodybuilder, whatever, that could like make them kind of buy in that little bit more, and how to say, put a person's ideas on a bit more of a pedestal, versus if it wasn't kind of preface with that. Whereas when you just go straight into the episode, you're kind of just listening to the person's ideas and how they can go about framing an argument or framing their thoughts or how they come to certain thought processes. And I guess then the information you get is more based off the merits of how they're presenting the information than, off this person's background. So I can definitely see that point of view. But, I think I might just kind of leave out the intro for now. If I do have people say, I actually I loved the theme music. I particularly enjoyed the intro, not so much the actual middle of the podcast. Then I might start recording them again. Anyway, for now, we're just going to keep it simple and just go straight in, no kissing. So we are 12 weeks into this gain phase now. And it hasn't really felt too much like a gain phase. And the reason it hasn't actually felt too much like a gaining phase is because of how I've went about previous gaining phases. Like I haven't gained a massive amount of weight. I've gained since August, right? So it started mid-August and now it's mid-November. And I've gained about 3 kilos. So it's roughly coming about a kilo per month, which actually it is a decent amount for me to be gaining right now, given my level of advancement. But it just doesn't feel like I've been gaining much because my body composition has remained very, very tight. I've somehow managed to keep myself quite lean. And I guess I've been asked questions as to how I think this has come about. And I think I can't give a definite reason why it has happened, right? Other than I've been following my plan virtually to a T, even though there has been maybe some kind of days here or there, which are very few in between, where things have not been perfect, right? So across the 12 weeks, there has been, since I started, right? There was one wedding, day 2, that I went to. There was my stag, which I went on 2 weeks ago to Amsterdam. That was 3 days. 2 days really, but 3 days in terms of start to finish and recovery. And other than that, everything has been pretty much managed as best I can, because I'm coming into this gaining phase with the mindset of okay, when I get on stage in 2027, I want to be able to say I've got a pro-worthy physique, right? And for me to have achieved that, I kind of need to be thinking about right now, not when I'm in prep. I need to be thinking right now, how does a pro bodybuilder and go about implementing a bulk or an off-season gaining phase, massive phase, whatever you want to call it. And for me, that does mean that I need to have a high level of accuracy and a relatively high level of rigidity with the likes of my kind of current phase. And that's not to say that having a high level of rigidity or high level of precision with the likes of macronutrients, it makes a massive difference, but it definitely gives me the illusion or kind of feeling of me being in more control. And I guess because my days are so exact and so similar together, right? Again, I'm in a privileged position. I work for myself. My day, my missus does the exact same thing as me. We wake up at the exact same time every day, go to bed at the exact same time every day. I eat my meals at the exact same time every day. There's no the only commuting I do on a day-to-day basis is to the gym and from the gym, maybe to the shop as well as from the shop, which we do nearly every fucking day. And everything is very, very tightly controlled, right? Do the same amount of steps per day, do the exact same 2 walks per day, right? So my day is very much the same. The only really kind of changes that are actually really happening from variables that may influence my growth over time is, I'm pushing that little bit harder in the gym, right? There's not a huge extra kind of allotment of stress just poking in. I don't have random days where I'm held back in work, right? Because I can decide when my work hours start, when they finish, and how I can spread that over more days, right? Very privileged position to be in. But I do think some things that have allowed me to maybe maintain a decent level of leanness through the likes of the last couple of months since I have started with the end phase is how I am kind of operating, I'd say 95% of the time. Then the other 5% of the time, I am going out for meals. I'm eating out at least once a week. And then alongside that, like there's maybe like a day here or there where my calories or macros are not perfect. But what I'm talking about, like not perfect, I mean like I could be like 200 calories over, right? At the moment, my calorie intake is quite high, so I can fit in a decent amount of kind of other stuff without really kind of knocking on too much. But in previous gaming phases, it's been completely different, right? Like my like getting to this place here where I'm able to keep more control, and I'm not really kind of seeing the food as like something that I'm really kind of driven towards pushing really really hard, or like I'm not the mindset of I just need to eat big to get big. It's not really there anymore. Or like something I used to do is like if I go out to a restaurant, I would just eat as much as I wanted to, right? Like, and how much I want to. That might sound that like now I'm being restrictive. No, it was like back then. It was just being I was like gluttonous. Like I'd happily order like 2 to 3 starters. I'd get a main course. I get like a couple of sides. I get like a dessert and stuff like that. And I wouldn't adjust my food earlier on in the day. So I love eating, and I can put away a lot of food as well. And it's funny that like when I see my bodybuilding prep, people are like, oh, I would love to do bodybuilding, but I just love food too much, or I'd love to get in shape like that, but I just love food too much. It's like, do you think I don't like food? I fucking love food. So, some of my favorite things to do in the world is eat, but I guess at the same time, I also want this goal. I also want this goal lots. I can hold back on that other thing. So in previous times when I would go through game phase, right, I've had a bit of an arc and a bit of a journey to get to this place where I'm able to kind of keep things a little bit tighter and a bit more control, right? And so again, I think the reason I've been able to keep a little bit leaner through this game phase, like TLDR, right, is like I've just been able to over years eradicate any kind of unhelpful behaviors and habits that would lead to faster rate gain, and I'm able to accept that like what I want right now is maybe not necessarily the best thing for my goal, and that just me being patient with what I'm doing right now is going to essentially lead me to where I want to be. However, in the past, I didn't have that experience, right? So my first few years of trying to put on size, it's kind of similar to what a lot of people do when they are trying to put on muscle mass. Is they're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go into a gain phase, going to go into a bulk, right? And all of the like structure, rigidity that they had in diet phase goes out the window. And big mistake is a lot of people focus too much on the food aspect. The food is important, right? Because you need to be in a surplus, but there's only so much of a surplus that you do need to be in. And what a lot of people do is they'll end up like, again, like relaxing on the structure that they had within the diet, right? And versus just like going into the gain phase where they're just tweaking their diet calories and just having that little bit more food, right? So that's really all that should really be happening. Maybe have a slight change in food sources, just allow for foods that are maybe a little bit more energy dense, or maybe a reduction of food volumes so they're easier to get in the top amount of calories. But what you'll have people, they'll have a certain way they're eating during the diet phase. And it comes to the gain phase, it's like, okay, I'm just gonna go back to old habits. I just need to eat more now. I just need to eat more, bro. It doesn't matter. Just hit my protein, get my calories high, and yada 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 yada. And it could just lead to like unhelpful behaviors around food and unhelpful mindsets around food, where it's just like a seafood diet, right? Seafood diet, right? Just anything you eat, you want to see, you want to eat. Oh, sorry, anything you see, you want to eat. Not anything you see, not anything you eat, you want to see. So, what I would have been doing back then, right? Like in the early days of me trying to do these gain cycles, is I'd probably have about a diet that'll like last maybe 5 to 6 months, right? I get lean and no issue with that. Right? I've always been pretty decent at dieting. Once I learned how to count calories, I just found the actual kind of process of getting leaner easy, right? Because even if the process wasn't perfect, like was looking back on those early diets now, I wouldn't say that I went about them in the best approach, but I got to the end outcome that I wanted to, right? And that's because I just kind of saw those numbers, those 3 numbers or 4 numbers, calories, protein, carb, fats, as numbers I had to live and die by. At the end of the day, I had no choice but to hit them or be within them. But then when it did come to bulk, it was like, okay, here's my target for my calories, but if I go over, that's me kind of doing a little bit better. It's like, okay, I could kind of justify, be like, oh, right, maybe we're going to gain weight a little bit faster and I'm going to put a bit more muscle that way, or I'm going to have a better training performance. And that could happen quite frequently. And then what would happen is my gaining phase ends up being like 2 months. 3 months, right? And a 2 month, 3 month bulk, it's not quite going to cut it in regards to putting on a lot of size, right? Well, yes, early on in your development, you are primed to put on more muscle quicker. You still want to be giving yourself plenty of time to put on the muscle, right? Because there's a certain amount of time that's going to take for you to gain the muscle. Alongside you gaining muscle, right? Especially when you're thinking about like being in surplus, there is also going to be fat gain that does come alongside it, right? Now, if you have a 300 calorie surplus, for example, and you're gaining, I can't give you an exact figure here, right? Because I haven't been able to find like exact figures on how much you could potentially be gaining in terms of muscle mass from the 300 calorie variable, right? But anyway, stick with me here. So if you have 300 calories, right, some of that's going to be dedicated towards muscle mass, some of that's going to be dedicated towards fat accumulation, okay? Now, if I push that towards 500 calories over, 1,000 calories over, it's still going to be the same amount that's dedicated towards muscle building, but the excess is going to be dedicated towards more fat accumulation, okay? So the faster we push in regards to the calories, you are going to get bigger, you're going to get stronger for sure, right? Because like ultimately at the end of the day, like mass will eventually end up moving mass, right? Like muscle does move weight, right? Muscle is the thing that produces force, but like you see super heavyweight powerlifters, or even talking to Andrew last week, right? Being bigger certainly does help move bigger weights, right? There's things like cushioning effects that are going to happen around like the back of the knee, like the hamstring to calf contact, like that aiding in some like rebound effect. There's going to be kind of bigger back, bigger chest, like even if it's just the likes of fat on there, and how that is like lying on the bench pad and like having like a lower touch or a higher touch point, right? You don't have to bring the bar down as far, and so on. That can lead to having an inflated sense of thinking that I'm putting on more muscle mass when you're having that performance increase occur, right? But performance increases, strength increases, or numbers on the bar is not always just related to having bigger muscles, full stop, right? So there is that can take place, and can give you this false sense of that, oh, I'm actually putting on a lot of size here because I'm getting stronger in the gym. So when you do push that a little bit harder, what inevitably happens for most people, right? They see themselves looking bigger initially, right? So maybe you're coming out of this diet phase, the first few weeks, you're pushing the calories really, really hard, and you're like, God, I'm looking good, I'm looking full, right? Your muscles are filling out, and you start to fill out your t-shirts again. But then you reach this like inflection point where all of a sudden, now you just see, oh, damn, I'm fat. And now you're 6 weeks into the gain phase. And while I don't think you having that feeling of, oh, I'm fat, should be the kind of point at which you turn around and decide to diet. Like I do think there's probably things that you can clean up within your diet, or again reframing your approach. A lot of people can't handle this from a mental point of view. A lot of people don't want to see themselves at this like level of softness, and what happens is they end up pivoting and going into diet, and then they come into this yo-yoing of going through gaining phases, or half committing to gaining phases, kind of doing them improperly, rushing the calorie side of things, rushing the food, and then rushing the weight gain, and all of a sudden they are just continually kind of making themselves, like to a degree, almost looking worse and worse, because the amount of weight that you actually gain during the gain phase primarily going to be body fat. Then you go through a harsh diet because you want to get it off quick, and then the harsher you cut, the more at risk you put yourself for muscle loss. And then over time, you could actually just put yourself into a position where you're making your body composition worse by doing these phases than doing it better. And that's kind of what I did for a long time, right? I would, again, do all these kind of like 4 to 6 month diet phases, and then have like a 2 to 3 month bulk. I was always reaching this point of like never being able to break my weight past 90. And I was like, no matter what I do here, I just can't seem to break past that point. What was really happening was I was actually just letting my foot off the gas, right? I was not kind of carrying forward a lot of the habits and behaviors that I would have employed during like my diet into like to the gaining phase. I would stop weighing myself as much. I'd stop taking my progress pictures as much, right? Like naturally enough, you're getting softer. Don't want to see yourself. You don't want to see yourself in mirrors often. You don't want to take pictures of it, because you just see yourself looking fatter and fatter. These two things here, right? Reduction in taking your scale weight and taking progress pictures. Now you're letting off the accountability, right? You're saying you want this goal of getting bigger, and gaining more muscle, but you are not dedicated towards tracking the outcome, and you're not having those things that are going to keep you on track or aligned with that goal, right? Because like if you're taking pictures of yourself every week during the gaining phase, you're taking your body weight measurement, and you see that number going up quicker, you see yourself looking like worse, visually worse from one week to next. That's a very like that's your opportunity to say, hey, I need to change something here, or else this is only going to continue going in the direction that I am. So I would have stopped doing that. And for me, I get to a certain certain point of of body fatness, but I would never be able to break past that specific weight. It was like almost like a mental block. And every time I get to say it, I'm like, why am I not pushing past this weight? Another thing that was coming into the mix was I wasn't being as diligent with like my calorie tracking. Still being on top of tracking during a gain phase is important, right? Because you want to ensure you're eating enough. Because you're going to get to a point, right, where okay, appetite's in a good spot, and you are able to almost intuitively eat that little bit more post diet. But your body will want you to get to a point, right? There's like this thing called a dual individual point where when we're getting leaner, our body will give us negative feedback so that we reduce our efforts towards getting leaner, right? So that could be that our body starts to reduce non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Your body will start to maybe have like a reduction in likes of thyroid output, for example. You may start to become more efficient at the amount of steps that you're doing, right? So your body's always trying to maintain homeostasis, right? This dynamic equilibrium of your body maintaining like healthy ranges. Then the upper end, right? For most people, they're gonna get to a point where their body's like, okay, if we get any fatter here, we're gonna start to experience some negative effects, right? Because if you think about from like an evolutionary standpoint, right? Your body did not want to get to the point of you being extremely lean because that could signal that you could die if a family came about, right? So your body's like always thinking about survival at the very heart of it, right? Let's reduce all other functions, so libido going down, like sexual function reducing and stuff like that. That's not as important when you're starving to death, right? Which your body thinks you are when you're getting really lean. But at the same time, when you get really fat, your body's like, okay, if we get any fatter here, we could become something's thinner here, right? So your body becomes at more risk of predation. So your body wants to kind of keep you away from that point. So you're going to get to this point where you're gaining weight, and what happens? Appetite decreases. As a result of your appetite decreasing, you don't have as much kind of drive towards seeking out food. And then the likes of even from a metabolic point of view, you can start to have like your energy expenditure go a lot higher and higher and higher. You see this all the time. Well, I see it all the time in people that I'm coaching when I'm giving them more food in the gain phase, and their calories just have to go up and up and up from continuing to gain weight, right? Because again, they're kind of reaching this kind of upper limit of where their body wants to be. This is kind of like where I was getting to all the time, right? It's getting to that point where appetite was just like, didn't have much point eating more food. I had to push myself to the point of discomfort to eat that a bit more. And I wasn't really doing that. Then COVID came along. And when COVID came along, I was like, okay, this is my opportunity here to do proper gain phase. I got myself lean and got into like 83 kilos or something like that, right? And I said, look, this thing here is probably going to go on for a decent amount of time. So I may as well just commit like until it's over to a gain phase. This is my opportunity here to just like commit. Because I always would have been like, okay, summer's coming up now, or here's this holiday coming up that I want to look good for, and that would be my reason for like perma dieting to a degree, right? Or not committing to a gain phase. Cover all around, I gained weight for about 18 months. I brought my weight from 83 kilos to 98, right? And to get to the 98, I did not push myself, right? I'd push myself to the point of discomfort, and my mindset switched from like keeping tabs and everything and like being a little bit more kind of cautious to a degree about kind of weight gain over a period of time to pushing myself and as well like doing these in short sprints to I'm going to do this over a longer period of time, but I'm going to see my calorie target as like, again, something that if I hit, I don't mind going over that a little bit more. And even to the point of then saying, you know what, I'm going to chase the scale weight now. And chasing the scale weight when you're getting the gain phase, probably not a great idea. Because what happens when you chase the scale weight? Well, we all want their goals sooner rather than later, right? So you end up like overshooting a mark. And if you see that number going up faster than it really should be, you kind of see that as a win versus like, okay, this is not the goal here, right? Because as I said already, the faster you push, the faster you can accumulate body fat. So to get myself up to 98 kilos, I had some pretty interesting food habits. that started to come into the mix. So I was in Spain for about 6 months prior to the lockdowns finishing, right? And that was like the kind of last stint of lockdowns. And every single night before bed, if you've ever been to Spain, right, there's these donuts that they sell in supermarkets. It's like a yellow packet, just called donut, I think. Donuts, right? How original. And they're kind of like Krispy Kreme-esque, right? They're plain, but they're glazed in sugary syrup, whatever it is. So I get two of those, have them every night before bed. One with a massive dollop of Nutella, one with a load of jam. To get in enough carbs after the training, because eating 150 grams of cereal was just not hitting the mark anymore, and it was getting too filling. Well, what I'd do was I would get baby food. I literally buy baby food like in the supermarket, and I'd have that instead. I can't remember how much I had of it, but I was having a lot. What else I do? I'd have every time I go to the supermarket, I'd buy like 2 packets of gyozas and have that with my lunch. Like I was eating a lot of calories, and I wasn't really doing that much movement either. Like I was maybe still doing about 10,000 steps, but I was eating well beyond my means. And I think I went from 98 or 93 to 98 in 3 months. So you can imagine that extra 5 kilos wasn't the best. Now, one thing that did happen during this period of time is my strength was the best it's ever been. I'd started to hit numbers I never thought I could. I squat, bench, deadlift. I was doing powerlifting at the time. And this was definitely like the loosest I had been in terms of gaining phase. And then I started work with a nutrition coach, right? So up to this point, it's pretty much self-coaching. And then I started working with Brian Hengasa, who was on a couple of podcasts ago. Now, I wouldn't have said that I had any kind of binge eating issues or anything like that. I wanted to push myself as hard as I could. I wanted to kind of experience this like quote unquote dirty bulk that people had mentioned before. And I will say that while it wasn't the best approach and definitely not the healthiest approach, and it was hard, it did kind of yield a lot of muscle gain. Okay. So there is definitely something to doing like some of these like more kind of quote unquote dirty bulks. And I think this is like, it's not a mistake people make when it does come to gaining body weight. I think that the biggest mistake would actually be the people who just commit the short timelines. So the people who just do the 2 to 3 month, because like while that gaining phase there did get a little bit out of control towards the end for sure, one thing that I was really, really adamant on during that time period was performance, right? Like training harder than I'd ever trained before, and really just getting into a good rhythm with being like mega consistent with the likes of my progressions, and just being really hungry to perform better. And ultimately, this was the thing, not the huge increase in body weight that allowed me to gain the size. Because like when I did cut down eventually, right? So that was 18-month gaining phase, and when I did the 18-month gaining phase, I have it up here, right? I dieted for 16 weeks, right? And I got from 98 down to 89. Okay. So yeah, what's that? 8 kilos, 9 kilos, right? 9 kilos down in 16 weeks. And when I got back down to 89 kilos, that weight that I had been struggling to push myself past, right, the 90 kilo mark, I looked way different. Like I never looked like that at 89 kilos, right? So whatever happened during that diet phase, I was able to shed off a lot of the body fat, but obviously a lot of the muscle mass I'd accrued had remained. Now, since that, right, that's the fattest I've been, and every gaining phase after that has gone a little bit better, right? I've experienced the eating more for the sake of eating more, pushing the scales, chasing a number. Now, I would say my weight at 90, which is that weight that I previously in like, fucking 10, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, would have always struggled to break past. It looks how, in terms of leanness, how 83, 85, 84 looked back years ago, so, and that's with, so that gaining phase was 2021, the end of it was 2021, it's 2025 now, so 4 years later, and I've done, pretty much a gaining phase every year, kind of bulked it put in with that. Maybe 3 actually, because I had a year of contest prep. But every year the process has gotten that little bit more refined. I've made a few more mistakes and learned from those mistakes. The mistakes for me quite often end up just being not managing my social occasions as much as I should, and kind of overstepping the mark when I'm ordering out at restaurants. But that's something that, again, it's taken a while for me to kind of take out of my memory, but something that has gotten better nonetheless. and probably the biggest thing that's kind of led to that change too as well is that I've crossed that timeline. So across like the last 10 years, the biggest change for me, right, has been this gradual change in mindset towards that my performance is the thing that's actually driving the gains, and the nutrition is just the thing that's happening in the background. And haven't seen the impact of, okay, if I push my weight up faster, especially as I got more advanced, the faster I push my weight up, I didn't get stronger at the same rate. It happened initially in that very first bulk where I went from like 83 to 98. It happened then because I was probably at a stage in my development where my strength relative to what it could be was just like still in its like early stages. Because I have tried that approach like since, like not to the extent or the aggressiveness as I would have done during that initial gaining phase, but I definitely have noticed that when I push my body weight a little bit faster than maybe like 1% per month, while I got bigger and filling out my t-shirts more sure on the arms as well as in the belly, that my strength just didn't increase at the same rate. So it just didn't seem as if the kind of juices were to squeeze to push it that little bit faster. So there is that kind of realization there. It's like, okay, the calories are important, me gaining weight is important, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's like the changes, the visual changes I'm seeing the most are for when I'm kind of setting these like landmarks with my training. So one thing I was like thinking about like recently when it does come to like the gaining phases in general, it's like these are the best opportunity we can have within our training to kind of just do cool shit in the gym, right? So you may be listening to this, maybe you've never benched 100 kilos before. Most people, right, probably going to like have a better opportunity to bench press 100 kilos if they are not dieting, right? If they're at least in maintenance or in a size surplus, right? And I can say that pretty confidently for pretty much most strength related goals. Most people are going to have a better time achieving them in a size surplus or maintenance than a diet, right? Now, again, this is not to say that strength is the ultimate thing. So like you achieving, a milestone in these lifts is the thing that is going to like help you gain muscle growth, because of course, or gain size, because ultimately at the end of the day, the outcome of those lifts is determined by skill at those lifts, how much you train that lift, and the specificity of like your programming towards increasing strength in it. But if over time you can see the likes of your 5 RMs on a lift increase, right? And you can see from block to block, you're having like key lifts improve. Well, yeah, that's going to be something that's indicating that you're developing more muscle mass. Like when I think about all the milestones I've hit with the likes of my deadlift or squat or bench, right? They've all occurred when I've been doing like gaining phases, right? Like the first time I deadlifted 220, first time I deadlifted 250, 275, 300, they all happened when I was a little bit softer and pushing my body weight and pushing for performance. But not only those 1 RM attempts increase, my working weights, right? The weights I was using for sets was improving. The weights I was using to build the accessory muscle. So again, the weights I was using for like building my glutes, my hamstrings, my back, they were all increasing as well. So there is something about kind of working towards those milestones and having them to be maybe something that like is kind of lighting the fire in your training that is facilitating with the likes of the muscle growth, because the actual process of getting that 1RM or that milestone ticked off is going to include doing a lot of hard work and having to perform at a pretty high level for you. So I do think if you are at the moment currently in the gaining phase, or maybe feel like you're spinning your wheels within this like gaining cycle, or you feel like you've never really been able to kind of commit to it, what I'd say to you is shift away from like the thoughts of like trying to like make your arms grow, your delts grow, your chest grow, and start shifting it towards what you do within your training. And I guess it's like to come back in a roundabout way. This is probably the thing that's changed the most about like my approach from the side that like makes a difference, right? The training within the gain phase. Well, like I've made all the mistakes there is to make on a nutrition front, so I know not to make them again. I know the juice is not worth the squeeze to push my calories harder. I do know that, of course, when I'm going through a gain phase, it's good to just implement the exact same type of mindset I had with the likes of my diet. Still being accountable towards meals out, still being accountable, taking my progress pictures, taking my weigh-ins, still being accountable with checking in with my coach every week, still being mindful of when I have trips coming up, that I still need to make good decisions during them. Being mindful of what my goal is, like, the level of my goal and how much that kind of, like, what that kind of requires me in social settings or even just in a day-to-day setting. But when it does come to the training side, the biggest thing has been just like focus on the performance, right? Because like I know that like even with a bodybuilding based goal, that I am not going to get bigger just by simply just thinking about my delt when I'm doing a lat raise, right? Like it's gonna be dictated by over time. Can I do more load or perform better with more reps or more sets with that muscle with the same range of motion with the same level of control? If I can do that over a greater period of time, that's going to lead to greater size delts. Now, I don't know many people who set goals on side delts, like in regards to I want to lateral raise X amount of kilos or bicep curls X amount of kilos. I'm sure people do. And it probably, like, there's no reason you can't do it. But I think a lot of people will probably gravitate a bit more towards the big multi-joint compound lifts. Let's set a goal on those lifts. And okay, like whatever it is that you're doing right now, set a stretch goal of like 20, 30, 40 kilos above where you are, or whatever the next milestone is. If you're currently at 80 kilo bench, work towards benching 100 kilos. If you're at 100 kilo bench, let's work towards benching 120. If you're 120, let's work towards benching 140, right? Because all of the kind of work that's going to go into kind of getting towards that milestone, it's going to take you a long period of time, right? It's going to have a long time course to actually achieve the goal. Could be 3 months, 6 months invested, and it will require a lot of thoughtful programming. You're going to have your programming geared towards developing the muscle groups, ensuring you have that lift within the program, and maybe periodize it over time. It's going to require you every time you step into the gym to come in with the mindset of I need to perform, I need to do better. And when you have that like part of the process in your mind that I need to perform better in the gym, what else kind of comes around that? Okay, well I better go to bed early like tonight because I'm going to have that important training session tomorrow. I better ensure that I'm just keeping myself hydrated because I want to ensure that I perform well tomorrow. I better make sure that I am keeping my nutrition at a good spot so I have good digestion, I have had enough protein throughout the day, I've eaten enough carbohydrates before and after my session so I recover better. So when you kind of set this like performance goal as like the kind of the thing that you're aiming towards, right? The day-to-day target, you could say, that makes your process overall better. And when your process overall is better, you're going to be in a better position to achieve that goal of gaining a lot of muscle. Ultimately, at the end of the day, gaining muscle is going to be something that is going to require long periods of time that like directed towards that goal, which is why setting these stretch goals or milestone or working towards milestone lifts is useful because there's no other way to achieve them other than giving them their time. Within them, you can always kind of have like little checkpoints within the journey. If you're at 120 and you're working towards 140, you have to hit 125 first. You have to hit 130 first. You have to hit 135. And then you're going to be in a better position to hit 140. And you can break that down into 4-week cycles, 6-week cycles, 12-week cycles. At every block, you're just trying to get a little bit better, 2.5 kilo closer to your goal. And if you're doing that again, everything else within your program is taking along alongside it, right? And by the end of that process, by the end of 6 months, right? So you dedicate your 6 months towards this one goal, right? You'll have a lot of muscle built. Hopefully, if you have been again kind of following along and listening to the mistakes I've made and understanding that you don't need to push extremely hard on the diet side of things, right? You can, keep your surplus to 200-300 calories above maintenance and gain at a little bit slower pace, but ensure that your performance ultimately is moving up. You'll be in a position to diet where you don't have to diet for too long at the end of it. And when you hit the milestone, that's a good opportunity to say, hey, let's work towards a diet now. How I've kind of done a lot of my own diets, right? I've worked towards something big, and then I've decided I'm going to do diet after. This year, I worked towards competing in the ab series in the pro-am division. I wanted to work towards squatting close to 300, fell just short of it, but I knew that my time was coming. My time was ended to kind of give powerlifting up and give bodybuilding a crack. It wasn't a case I didn't want the goal as much as I wanted this goal, if that makes sense. But there's always been something that I've been working towards that has been like essentially the climax for that current phase. So the ab series was the climax for my gaining phase that time around. The previous year, what did I do the previous year in terms of the gain phase? Yeah, I think it was I had a competition in the States, and that was climax for that gaining cycle. When I prepped for my shows in 2022, the climax for my gaining cycle before then was competing at nationals. So there's always been something that's been like, okay, this has been this big goal that I wanted to work towards. I'm going to dedicate a number of months here towards performance. Let's see what happens. And always at the end of it, because you're working towards something that intensely, there's only going to be positives that come from it, right? Because ultimately at the end of the day, your day-to-day process is going to dictate what the outcome is going to look like. Anyway, so I went on a bit of a rant there in regards to, I guess, mistakes that have been made. And like this one thing, man, I'm so bad at, you probably have noticed, but I'll say, okay, I'm going to tell you exactly how my calories and everything like that have progressed, my training has changed and all this kind of stuff, but I end up going to some rant like that about mistakes I made and how you can solve mistakes for yourself. But I guess that's more interesting, isn't it? It's more useful for you, the listener, if you know what type of pitfalls you should be maybe kind of staying away from. But yeah, like my in terms of the progression for the gain phase, right, there has been a number of changes that have been made so far. So I have had the calories bumped up by, I can't tell you the actual change I've had in the calories. 1 second, I can get it up here on my sheet here because I'll be able to tell you from the exact numbers. So my body weight at the end of this diet phase was 86.94 according to my sheet, and my calorie average, so at the end of my diet phase, my calories were on average about 2,900. Just look at my sheet here and what I've logged, and that was 86.9. And then if I come to now, my calories so far, well, we had an actual increase this week, but my target calories are like 4,200. So my calories are up about 1,300 calories. I think that's correct, yeah. 1,300 calories since I stopped dieting. So it's been a pretty big increase, and that's without having any change in energy expenditure all that much. Like what I'm still doing 2 walks a day, as I said. My routine stayed the exact same, but we've had 1,300 calories added back in, which has been nice, right? So there's a good period of time there where body weight was just being very, very slow, and the way AJ was increasing the calories is essentially, once he saw that my weight was like sticking for like 2 to 3 weeks, he'd have an increase there in calories. But for the first few weeks, there was a bit more of a rapid escalation, whereas the last calorie jump I had was this week, and then before that was about 6 weeks prior. So the big thing when it does come to making changes like this in the gain phase is that you are very much kind of doing it based off, you know, your like based off the body weight, the visuals, and also just being like relatively cautious with it, like the later into the gain phase you want, right? Because like what you're kind of looking for when it does come to things to use as proxies for are you gaining sufficiently is obviously the pictures that you take week to week. Okay, again, another reason to take them so you actually see what changes are taking place, because gaining muscle is a visual goal. Body weight going up too. If you want to, you can take measurements, but measurements can be extremely slow to notice change on, especially if you're just not a noob anymore. If you're a noob, you'll be able to see changes like in your limbs relatively quickly. The more advanced you get, I think they're just like less useful to do. Like I've noticed that the only thing that's changed really in my measurements over time, like the last like couple of years, has been mostly my waist. Like, so at a higher body weight, my waist would be lower, my limbs would stay virtually the same, which is a good sign of like recomposition taking effect. But again, if I was to just be looking at my arm size looks like it's been the same for like the last few years. But I can see that they visually look different, right? So that's again where the likes of the pictures are more important than the likes of measurements here. When we're making a change, we don't want to make changes for the sake of making change, right? There's no kind of such thing really, like whether you're losing weight, gaining weight, as like, oh, I've been on these calories for too long, I think I should increase them or decrease them, right? It's always based off your response. And kind of like you do get to a point where having a calorie change take place, it kind of just throws off routine a little bit, and you do have to make adjustments, right? And the more we can kind of keep people in routine and keep things stable and just again focus on like I said, the training progressions, the better the outcomes realistically are going to be. One of the biggest mistakes that people make when it does come to again phase is the pushing the calories up too quickly, right? If your body weight stays the same for a week, right? So across a two-week period, 90 kilos 1 week, and you're 90 kilos next. If it stays the exact same across that period, that's not the point where I'm saying, okay, we should push the calories up, okay? Because it could be sufficient, right? Like the calories could be sufficient, and it's just not really kind of showing there an average just yet. But from 1 week to next, there could be some visual changes taking place, right? So again, the visuals are the thing that you're using to corroborate the likes of the scale weight. Because if you're looking tighter from 1 week to next, but the body weight stays the same, that's the kind of change that you're looking for, right? You're kind of looking for that improvement in body composition, because the only way you're looking tighter is if there's been some type of recomposition taking place. Now, if it was a case that, okay, from week 1 to week 2 to week 3, right, we're still seeing that it's 90, and there's not much change between week 2 to week 3, you might say, okay, not much change is taking place here right now, but the previous few weeks we were gaining weight appropriately these calories. Let's see what happens next week. And instead of next week, there's no kind of change, right? But we're still seeing performance improvements. They'll say, okay, yeah, let's make a change in terms of average calories, right? Like one way I do it with the likes of my clients when it does come to their gaining is I will use like an average body weight across a kind of month, right? So I'll take like week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. I'll take the average weight take the kind of total weight that's been gained across that period. And then I'll see, okay, between those 4 weeks, what would like the average rate of gain be? And ideally, the average rate of gain is kind of amassed to something that's going to be like between 5 to 1% to 0.5 to 1.5% of their body weight per month, depending on their level of advancement. It's lower for the people who are more advanced, so closer to 0.5% of body weight gain per month, closer to 1.5% for the people who are a little bit newer and they haven't really done any gain phases just yet. And then if we're kind of falling within that across the 4-week period, then I'll kind of keep things the exact same, right? Like, because you're going to have some weeks where the change in scale weight is just not uniform. And again, there's like, it's hard to explain exactly why that is happening. It could be, again, like 1 week you're doing a little bit more energy expenditure than the other one. Maybe 1 week you are having a little bit less fiber than you were having, right? There's, like, again, there could be a number of different reasons why it is happening. Maybe 1 week you're deloading, right? Again, so there are a number of different things that can bake into maybe why kind of scale weight can just be kind of halting or whatever. Again, there could be recomposition occurring, which is again kind of muddying the waters there too. But having the visuals, having that kind of scale weight there on a day-to-day basis, and then as well looking at over a broader period of time, again kind of looking at maybe across a kind of 4-week average is probably a better way to do it in my opinion. Because again, the thing we're not looking at is just driving up calories for the sake of driving up calories. We're looking to drive up calories to help kind of like allow the environment where a body has ample resources to build new muscle tissue and to facilitate higher levels of training performance. I think sometimes when people are, maybe during the gaining phase and they are kind of complaining about, being on the same calories for too long, or they are even feeling hungry during a gaining phase, some of it can come down to like the actual quality of food they're taking in, the food selections. And, this is actually one thing I remember saying to a previous coach. And, it's mentioned, my calories are so high, but I think we should maybe pump them up a little bit more because I'm quite hungry. And I was expecting the coach to say, all right, let's have a bump up in food there. You're feeling a little bit hungry. You could probably do it with food. But they firmly reminded me, hey, you might feel hungry, but your body weight is going up, and it's going up pretty reliably. So maybe it's just something we could change on the actual food inputs, And what that looked like for me is like, okay, I noticed that, all right, I'm eating a little bit more kind of convenience food, a bit more processed food, a bit more hyper palatable food. Handy if you are struggling to get the likes of the calories up, and handy in a pinch. But if you're eating a lot of like palatable foods, things that are driving a lot of food reward, they are going to be things that make it a lot easier for you to gain body weight, which is good in the gain phase. But they're also going to be things that maybe don't have you to feel as satiated. They're maybe going to be foods that maybe want you, or maybe have you wanting for more, which is definitely not what you want when you are in a gain phase too, because you don't want to have like this like bottomless pit where you feel as if you're just like being deprived and you could eat rings around you, because that's going to make adherence that little bit harder. So when we're going through gain phase, and like my mindset on this has really kind of pivoted across like the last couple of years, where again I was coming from that like almost like if it fits your macros or if it goes beyond your macros approach, and eating a lot of like hyper palatable food and ultra processed food to get my calories up, and just like just push the limits of how much fucking food I can take in. Whereas like now I have a big emphasis on having as much minimally processed food within my diet. I eat a lot of like I think I have like one food really that I could maybe kind of count as like a processed food within my diet. Is like Cocoa Pops, right, which is really just puffed rice. But haven't changed a lot of my approach towards the food sources. It's being again more lean meats, dairy, keeping an eye on fruit and vegetables, right? I think one thing that if you want to ensure that you're keeping your satiety in check, your digestion in check during a gain phase, don't skip out of fiber, right? Keep your fiber intake to 10 to 15 grams per 1,000 calories. If you do that, I guarantee you it's going to be hard to be in a position where you're feeling as if you want more, right? Because you're going to be giving your body all the nutrients it needs, right? Like fiber is, and I use this with clients all the time, fiber essentially is it's a conduit for nutrition quality, because most fibrous foods, right? We're talking about whole grains, we're talking about nuts, we're talking about seeds, we're talking about fruits, vegetables, all jam-packed with nutrients. And when it does come to like reaching the ascendancy of like, of gaining weight or going through gaining phases and doing them like, in a really kind of a slow, progressive manner that allows you to pack on more lean tissue and less body fat, I do believe that there is some benefit that's happening there with having better micronutrient status, right? Because you have better micronutrient status, your energy day to day is going to be better. You're going to be able to perform better. You're giving your body all of the raw material that it needs to function optimally. Fiber intake can be a good kind of conduit essentially to get in those micronutrients. So if you aim for that in your gain phase, I guarantee you your body composition is going to be better by the end of it. But again, it's going to be something that as well helps you keep satiated, right? Helps manage blood sugar levels, and blood sugar spiking and dropping is one thing that does have people feeling a lot hungrier, a lot more tired, and have that feeling of like, I need more energy, I need more food. And this could be you in a gain phase, right? If you are having poor blood sugar control because you're eating a lot of like processed food, not having much fiber, having high carbohydrate intakes, but again, not having any fiber to kind of blunt that spike. You're maybe getting a little bit more sedentary. So again, as a result of you being sedentary, you're not having better blood sugar control. Again, you may feel, I just need more food. When it could just be a case that, okay, I need to improve the quality of my food. I need to eat more fiber. I need to maybe kind of keep on top of doing a little bit more walking to help with managing the blood sugar regulation. And there are also aspects of, okay, well, how are your eating habits? In a gain phase, yeah, do you know what? You probably want to ensure that you're getting all your calories down, but you don't need to be wolfing it down, right? If you are eating your food at like a obscene speed, right? You're like speed eating it. You're barely chewing your food. You can get to a point where, well, number one, you can get indigestion, you get bloating, but you could also get to the point where you're eating so much food, but you're not really getting much satisfaction from it, right? Slowing down your eating speed can be a very helpful way to do this, right? So 5, 10, 15 method is a really helpful way that I like to think about this. So 5 deep belly breaths before you eat helps to regulate your nervous system and get you into a more parasympathetic state. 10 seconds or 10 chews, whatever, between bites, probably more than 10 chews really. So 10 seconds between bites, put your knife foot down, 15 minutes per meal. Do that, and I guarantee your digestion is going to improve, and the amount of satiety, satisfaction you get from likes of meals is going to increase substantially. And you won't. If you do all those things, right, you, again, improve your food quality, include more fiber in the diet, include more fruits and vegetables, more lean meats, reduce the amount of processed foods in the diet, try to get your bulk or gaining phase as close to quote unquote clean as you potentially can, and reducing like any of these like hyper foods, not like completely out. Like again, you can still use like the 80-20 rule, having 20% of your nutrition for more palatable foods, 80% for more kind of whole unprocessed goal oriented foods. You will be in a much better position, because again, what a lot of people do, and it's doesn't pass, is like have more of a 50-50 split of just shite within the diet that's really not served me, other than, you know, maybe making me a little bit softer around the midsection because I can't stick to my calorie intake. And I guess we've spent a lot of the episode here talking about this gaining phase, so I don't think I'm gonna have time to talk about the Christmas. But I'm gonna record maybe an episode tomorrow, and we can have that to be a Christmas episode, which would actually work out well, because then I have a podcast episode for next week. One of the kind of biggest components here, which I mentioned is really, really important, is performance, right? So the training itself has largely remained the same. I've had a couple of tweaks to my programming, and the couple of tweaks have just come by in regards to slight changes in exercise selection. And this is just like, part of it is down to just overall enjoyment, right? So I've talked about this in previous podcasts before in regards to not program hopping and giving exercises the time needed to get better at them, right? So I do think that we should be keeping our exercise programs, especially for hypertrophy, pretty much the same for like at least 6 to 8 weeks, at least, okay? And this is because it's going to take you about 6 to 8 weeks to really kind of nail down training technique and allow any kind of nervous system or neurological adaptations to take place. And then after that, it's typically when you're going to have maybe a slowdown in like strength, or like reps going up and up and up and up, and stupid amounts of weight being added to the bar every single week. So from here on in, you're going to see mostly some type of like muscular adaptations taking place, right? Which is going to have a slower rate of progression. Now, with that, it kind of means that maybe we say, okay, if we're going to have these exercises in the program, we should keep them in here long term, so we don't always have to go through this like skill learning phase, or this phase you're always trying to just get the neurological adaptations out of the way before we start making the muscular ones. Now, I had essentially been running the exact same plan and the exact same exercises for 20 plus weeks, right? So my dieting phase, I believe, was about 20 weeks. And with that, there's a number of exercises which were kind of decreasing across the entirety of that 20-week period, right? Particularly some presses. And you get to a particular point where, you know, you're like, okay, I'm being consistent with these exercises. I'm going to give them time to progress. But you develop a relationship with the exercises too, where you're just like, you know what, I'm not even enjoying coming in to do this exercise. You know, and I was getting to that point with a number of ones where like, it wasn't that I was dreading it and how hard it was going to be. I just wasn't looking forward to doing it. And I think anytime you have exercise like this, where you're just dreading doing it, right? You're dreading doing the exercise, and as a result of dreading it, like, you rush through it. You don't like get yourself in any type of zone to concentrate, focus, or really push yourself that much. It should be something that's rotated out and put in with something that's going to train the muscle similar, like a similar manner, or train a similar muscle group, but it's going to make you enjoy your training. Okay, because we're always we're trying to at all times ensure that like there is enjoyment within the training program. It doesn't mean we have to enjoy every single aspect of it, and some exercises are going to be there which are going to be ones that we need to do to make ourselves better, but we may not necessarily 100% enjoy it. Okay, like, it may not necessarily be your favorite way to go about it, but it's a necessary evil. But if we don't enjoy the training that we're doing, that's as a result of causing us to have our efforts be subpar, then that exercise needs to go. So some of those changes are made. So, but they're very simple changes, right? My flat dumbbell pressing is getting really frustrated with it, even though I was eating more food for a decent period of time, right? I thought in the gaining phase, like, you know, given it 6 weeks in the gaining phase, you'd expect there to be a bit of improvement, considering, you know, I was eating more calories and putting on more body fat. No change. Change that to an incline, right? The incline is enough of a change for me to say, okay, this is a different exercise now. Or remaining deadlifts. getting to the point where I just felt as if my spine's about to break in half. And again, just wasn't really enjoying it because it was just becoming a little bit hit or miss in regards to performance. So change it to a regular deadlift. A couple of rowing variations were just, again, not hitting the mark, being stagnant for a number of weeks. And again, just made a change to a different row variation. So picking a similar movement pattern, just on a different machine, using a different implement, using a different incline, but still training the appropriate muscle. And this is the beautiful thing about training for hypertrophy. You can be so flexible with the exercise that you do use because it is a very flexible adaptation, right? We have so many different options for how we can train muscles, and the principles largely remain the same. Get the muscle to be exposed to load, exposed to tension, and train it to a high degree of to close proximity to failure. And if you do that, boom, you have the muscle built. And there's so many different tools that can fit the job. And this is like one of those reasons why I'm very I'm pro all exercises for the most part. You know, I hate this, like, and you've probably guessed it from podcasts I've done, but like do you train science-based or you train old school? It's like, what the fuck do you mean? Like, all exercises are just tools. And if you are so set in the camp where you can't pick the right tool for the job, then that to me is just idiotic, right? Old school exercise, I say for example, old school exercise, barbell row, right? But if at the point of your training journey, or because of other exercises within your plan, okay, say for example you're doing RDLs, you're doing deadlifts, you're doing lots of other kind of bent over stuff, and you also notice that, okay, doing bent over rows, my back is always getting fatigued, like my lower back is always getting fatigued, or I'm just not getting a good kind of rowing motion because I'm too committed to lifting too heavy. Okay, that's a really good shotgun approach for light to your back. But maybe what we need right now is a sniper. Maybe what we need is a single arm cable row, okay? And a single arm cable row is not science-based. It's you're just applying tension to the muscle, right? You're using a fucking cable. It's no more science-based than a barbell is science-based. You know? There is some element of engineering and physics that had to go into developing the bar that's a nice, long, even barbell with evenly distributed loads across either sides. Like, tell me how that's any less science-based than using a cable, right? It's just a tool. This is, again, why bodybuilding is such a nice kind of it's so forgiving, right? Because again, many tools fit the job. When we kind of reach the point of saying that, okay, this exercise that we're doing here, we're not getting much return investment from it. Okay, you have an exercise which is either regressing or staying the same, and I kind of use this with clients. If an exercise is regressing or staying the same, okay, for up to 3 weeks, all right, because you might having a week where your performance is a little bit down, it can happen. Having a week where your performance stays the same, it can happen. Having it happen for 2 to 3 weeks and then having that happen across a number of exercises, that's a point for change. If it happens across a number of exercises, that's a point for maybe deload. If it happens across one exercise, that's a point for a change. And just rotate it out for something different. Because even just having that slight change in implement, equipment that you're using, or even rep range or set prescription can be enough of a change to kind of breed kind of further progression, further progress, and further excitement. Because when you have that little bit of a change, and everybody will get this, you get that little bit of novelty in, and you feel like a kid at Christmas, and you're going in to attack this new exercise. You get to set new goals and work towards them. And again, as I've talked about already in this podcast, you work towards something that you set a new goal on, and you're excited to do it. What's going to happen over time? Boom, you're going to get bigger. You're going to gain more muscle in that area. And that's essentially what I've done. I've put in some exercises which I haven't run in the past that I'm excited to push. Or exercises which, again, for the sake of me doing powerlifting for so long, I never really got an opportunity to program, and now I'm working towards them, and I'm really excited to see what type of progression I can make. That's the extent of the kind of training tweaks that we've really made. The volume overall has remained largely the same. The likes of the training structures remain largely the same. Just a couple of swaps here or there for different lifts. And really, like, once you have the foundation laid, right? Once you have the training structure laid out, you have your amount of days kind of laid out, and that's obviously facilitating a decent amount of recovery, right? So the way I have my training schedule laid out is I do 3 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off. And that's how I have it kind of laid out. That's how it works for me in regards to my recovery. And if you're doing a 5-day training program, it's a pretty good way to do it. If you do a 6-day training program, where you're doing 6 training days, you might do 3 on, 1 off, 3 on, 1 off. If you do a 4-day training program, you might do 2 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off, and then repeat the cycle, and so on. Okay, but the training structure is kind of facilitating that recovery from session to session, but it's one thing that remains pretty much fixed 90% of the time. Then after that, the volume levels, they are things that could potentially be rotated during the course of time, right? Now for me, and what I'm currently doing at the moment, most of my training is progressing. When most of your training is progressing and you're on a set level of volume, there's no point of changing things for the sake of making change, okay? And this is something that you'll often come across when you are going through your gain phase or you're going through your training journey. You'll be confronted with the question of, am I doing enough volume? Am I doing enough work? And generally, like how I go about this when people come to me, and maybe they're looking to go into a bulking phase, and then I'll have a look at their training program if they have some training program laid out, and also comes into the point of like, okay, well, what's your training level advancement? Whatever they're doing, like previously, I will maybe have a little bit of a tweak, right? Because they're coming to me for coaching and they've been a little bit stuck with their level of progress and they're doing 4 sets per exercise. I'm going to look at that and say, okay, they're doing four sets per exercise. They're a little bit stagnant to their training right now. They're not making much progressions. Okay, let's strip that back and let's do 2 sets really well. And let's have a big focus on just like, again, small progressions week to week, right? No, like, okay, we need to do 10 sets for your chest or yada, 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 right? It's very much the case of, okay, this current approach has kind of, they've probably gotten as much out of this approach as they can. Let's have a big enough shift in training volume so we can maybe kind of rebuild upon what they're already doing. Because a lot of times, well, when people are doing a high level of training volume, like 4 sets per exercise, they can get to the point where they're not pushing that hard through all 4 sets. Maybe they're pacing themselves from set 1 to set 4 because they know they have 4 sets to do, so they're not really training that hard for set 1, set 2, set 3. They're just pushing the 4th set that little bit harder. They're maybe not as engaged during the sets, so again, as a result of not being as engaged during sets, they're not reaching a close enough proximity to failure. They may not have as much kind of emphasis towards progressive overload, yada yada yada. Right? There's different reasons why that may be the case. Then if somebody's coming to me and they're not progressing much with the two set a week, the 2 set per exercise strategy, or whatever it is, right? Then I might say, okay, maybe we have an opportunity here to have a little bit of an increase in training volume. Okay, so we're kind of using that as like the kind of the way to kind of assess or give somebody something that is going to be a slight tweak or change to the programming to yield a kind of decent result. And it's based off what they've currently been doing, okay, versus just pulling a number out from thin air. Now, if somebody does have no kind of training data and no training experience, then that's kind of when we're kind of confronted with, okay, well, what do we do here in terms of like giving them a level of volume to progress on? And that's kind of when you kind of refer, or I refer back to the research. What does the research say about the average person and how much training volume that they should do? And then I'll kind of go towards the lower side per muscle group per week. And then depending on what their preferences are in regards to body parts they have a little bit more focus from, okay, maybe those exercises we have a little bit more, and on the exercises which they, or the body parts they don't have much preference for, we go a little bit lower. And then that's also going to be filtered in with how many days they can train per week, because somebody doing 3 days per week versus 4 versus 5, it's all going to relate to different levels of training volume that they can accumulate. But once you have the training volume, look, regardless of whether that person is coming in with a blank slate, the person is going from 4 sets to 2 sets, the person is coming in with the 2 set approach already, maybe going to the 3 sets per exercise, 3 sets on muscle groups that are not progressing. Once you get to that point of finding the volume for a large part of the time is going to remain relatively fixed and only gets added in once we kind of note that there's maybe some type of lack of progression happening. And then within that, there's other decisions that you need to come up with when it does come to, do we need to have an increase of volume or decrease of volume? So when it does come to making that decision, we need to assess like what the recovery is. Is it a case that the muscle group itself is not progressing, or is it something that's happening across like a number of different exercises? Okay, maybe it's just a case that you need deload. If it's happening across a load of different exercises, then yeah, that could be a case there where we just need to have a deload versus having to have a volume increase. Okay, volume increases really over time would be things that are done very gradually. It won't be a case where you're increasing volume every single block for hypertrophy goal. It'd be something that you maybe do every couple of months, depending again on how your process is going, how your progress is going. So one way to do this is you go through a couple of blocks. At the end of the blocks, you maybe do a little bit of block review, and I do this with clients. Assess recovery and assess fatigability. Right? Boom. I'll get people to rate their performance, their recovery, and how much fatigue they felt at the end of the block. If you're noticing that fatigue is low, recovery is high, and they are maybe not seeing as much progress with the likes of the current training program, in that context, maybe that person needs to have a little bit more volume put in, okay? Because at the end of the block, you should have, like, and coming up towards the deload, especially if it's like across 8 to 10 weeks to 12 weeks, you should notice that fatigue is getting quite high, because fatigue is getting high because you're pushing towards higher levels of performance. If not, well, yeah, then that probably means we need to have an increase of workload. If we're getting towards the end of the block and recovery is really low, fatigability is really low, but progress has been really low too, progress has been really, really slow across the block to non-existent, that's when we need to maybe have a set decrease. And that's done on an exercise to muscle by muscle basis, right? It's not done just blanket across the whole program, because you'll have exercise or muscle groups within the training program that are progressing well and ones that are not progressing well. And again, they have to be both assessed on, like, okay, based off, like, at the end of the training block, okay, my legs are absolutely battered and haven't been making progress on them at all across the training block. Whereas my upper body, my chest, for example, is in a great spot, but I still don't feel as if I'm pushing. I'm not getting as much progress as I want. I am always feeling really recovered at the end of a week, or not really feeling at the end of a session that the chest has been worked all that much. Okay, the set needs a little bit more work, but legs, they're noticing that they're not progressing as much and they're too fatigued. Okay, we need to pull maybe some sets back on some particular exercises, and naturally enough, making training tweaks to that. How do we even go with that in regards to what exercise to adjust first? Well, accessory movements, or isolation based movements, right? Single joint movements are going to have the lowest amount of kind of reduction of fatigue if we do tweak them. The likes of the more multi joint lifts, they're going to have the highest impact in regards to fatigue if we reduce them. So the question there is more so put on to you as an individual, you as the trainee. Which of these exercises do you think will have the largest reduction in training stress? And if you're making an increase, which of these is going to have the biggest bang for your buck? All right. So again, you can take from that information what you will. But this is essentially like how I go about it when I'm coaching my own clients in regards to making training volume tweaks. But again, these are only tweaks that will be made like every now and again. So if I'm making a volume increase, it's only based off like it's based off a muscle by muscle basis and based off response to training versus just a random, okay, we're going into your third block now here, we need to have an increase in volume. Okay, because again, if progress is going over. Adding an extra set, adding an extra exercise, it's a large increase in training stress, and big increase in training stress can predispose to potentially more injury risk initially if we don't adapt, if our recovery is not a good spot. But also, it's more of a time suck, right? The more time we need to spend in the gym and dedicate towards training. So if we can get, not essentially the most from the least, but if we can get the most from what we're doing right now before we need to make a change, then we may as well, right? Again, just making change for the sake of making changes, it has to be based in some type of rationale for actually making a change versus just making it blindly. And that's, again, why there's been very little changes to my training. Progression is going pretty nicely. No real kind of volume tweaks has been really made, other than I've made like maybe 1 to 2 myself across and this is, again, I've mentioned this to AJ, right? AJ's coaching me, but we kind of collaborate on this type of stuff. There's maybe adductors, for example. I've done like 1 extra set. So I was doing 2 sets per week. Now I'm doing 3 sets per week. Okay. That's the extent of the change that I've really made. But that's helped me progress a little bit more from a strength perspective, right? So I've had a bigger increase in strength across all of my sets now, and just from adding in that additional set. So, and that was based off the fact that, again, my recovery on that area was good. Didn't really feel as if I was having the area be too sore, too beat up, but my strength was, my progress was stalling out on it. I was recovering well. Okay, I can add an extra set here. And now I've added an extra set, I've gotten the progress, right? I definitely noticed a little bit more fatigue. I'm getting more kind of strength progressions, and there's definitely been a slight kind of change in terms of actual muscle volume too, which I can see. Yeah, again, there's just a little bit of an example as to how that would happen in actual kind of real terms. All right, so look, this podcast ended up being nearly an hour and a half. I'm not going to get into the Christmas discussion. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pause this here. I'm going to record a Christmas podcast for next week, and then we can pick it up from then. Okay, so yeah, look, hopefully you had this gave you some interesting kind of insights as to how I go about my current game phase. Maybe it's going to give you some interesting insights as to how to implement some changes to yours, or lack of changes to yours, and just kind of keep on the path. But ultimately, guys, right, like when you're kind of going through these game phases, it's really important, right? It's a multi-year goal, and this is something I'm talking more and more to clients about. What we're doing here, it is a multi-year process, right? I've been doing this since I've been 15, and it's iterative, right? Every single time you go through a year of whether you're going through a gain phase, dieting phase, you're getting a year older, a year wiser, and hopefully you're kind of using what you're learning through your note taking, whether it's tracking for nutrition, taking your progress pictures, taking notes in your training program. You're getting that a little bit better every single year, right? Because getting to the position of you reaching that ideal physique, that physique you want at the end of your diet phase or at the end of your gaining phase, it's a result of it's going to be a 5, 10, 15 year process of getting there. But if we all stick together and we kind of hold our own, and we keep on kind of learning as years go on, we're going to get closer and closer to the position we want to be in. All right, if we do have any questions for me, do let me know. Other than that, I'm going to leave the podcast here. Any ratings and reviews, appreciated. And other than that, guys, I will chat to you next week.